The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, a hazy and semi-depressing Monday here in Southern California. I hate when the sun isn't out in Southern California. On the line from NFL.com, Inside the NFL Network, and Mike, I have some bad news for you. Mike Lombardi. Andy Reid just fired you. And you don't even work for him. He just fired you. I don't know what you did, but you got fired.
Well, you know, the good thing about Andy Reid making these decisions is every morning on my way to NFL Films, if I stop at the Great Wawa, which you wouldn't know anything about living in Southern California, it's the local dairy. There's a zillion of them around here, gas station and coffee places, or Dunkin' Donuts. It stimulates a lot of conversation. And it's interesting because you can't go in there without that being on the topic bar of everybody in the place. And the mood is so depressing here in Philadelphia with Andrew Bynum's knees and the Eagles team and no hockey. It's really been a difficult late fall, let me say that.
Somebody on Twitter, I forget who, made a joke that Andy's last few months are starting to resemble the Nixon White House.
I thought it was great. I read that too. I thought it was so classic.
You agree with that?
I thought I'm just so disappointed I didn't think of that, you know?
Yeah.
That was brilliant. Yeah, you know, and people here at Films this morning as we were kicking it around the round table, you know, this wasn't a move that was made just prematurely. Obviously, Andy came into started on the flight home, made the move because Tommy Brasher, his former defensive line coach, was in place when he got here Monday morning after the late-night loss in Dallas. So this is something he thought about over the weekend. And clearly you have to get permission from the owner if you're going to fire somebody and replace them and you need money to replace that person with. You have to at least run it by the owner. And Jeffrey Lurie obviously said yes.
So Andy makes the Super Bowl in 2004, loses to the Patriots, goes 6-10 the next year. In 06, 10-6, wins the division, wins a playoff game by 1 point against the Giants, and I think that was the game that something funky happened with the long snapper, or maybe I'm thinking of another game. Something weird happened that game. 8-8 in 2007, 9-6-1 in 2008. 11-5 in 09, 10-6 in 2010, 8-8 last year, and headed for probably like 3-13, 4-12 this year. I was going through. I found a column I'd written in 2008 where I was really going in hard on Andy Reid jokes. Is it possible that he's just been bad for a while and we didn't realize it?
Well, I think you have to really study Andy's relationship with his defensive coordinator, Jim Johnson. And I think there's an Andy with Jim, and then there's an Andy after Jim. And since Jim has left and no longer with the Eagles and unfortunately died, the Eagles have not been able to find, or Andy Reid has not been able to find the answers defensively that he needs to offset and augment some of the situations that happen with his offense. So I think when you look at Andy over the landscape of his career here in Philadelphia, there's going to be Jim Johnson era and then the non-Jim Johnson era.
And we always like talking about identities with football teams. The Eagles did have an identity for a long time. You know, it was the blitzing team on defense, and on offense, very imaginative, and there was going to be some clock management issues and some weird short yard stuff. But overall, it was a good package and consistent, and it just fell apart.
Yeah, it blended perfectly. It looked like Jim Johnson knew exactly what he needed to do, how he needed to make plays. It was a complementary defense to what they did offensively. And since then, and he was the master at making adjustments and the master of game chess in terms of the NFL and playing good in the red zone. And I think more importantly than just the defense, I think he knew exactly what he needed in terms of personnel to fit his defense.
Yeah.
And I think that really has been missing since he's no longer with them.
It seems like we've hit this point with the NFL that coaches, no, in the old days, coaches just got canned. And you could tell when a team was kind of quitting on the coach and they just fired him. And now it seems like coaches are getting the benefit of the doubt to ridiculous degrees. I mean, San Diego, that team was finished 3 weeks ago. Norv Turner's still the coach. Philadelphia, that team was finished. It might even been in September. They looked like they were finished. But why are these coaches hanging around when the teams have clearly quit on them?
Well, I don't know if quit's a strong term here. Quitting, the Chargers have a chance to win that game. I don't know if a team had quit. Now, if the Chargers got beat 49-0 to Andy Dalton and the Cincinnati Bengals, then I could agree with you and said they quit. But that's not quitting. I mean, they had the chance to win that game. They were in that game. They had the lead late in the fourth quarter in that game. Did they play well? No, but that's who they are. That's who the San Diego Chargers are. The Eagles have played every game with an opportunity to where they didn't quit. They were playing, and they failed to make the plays, or they failed to do what they had to do, and so so to me that's why they continue to keep their jobs, because once you walk into the room and you fire the coach, you've now said to the players and to the organization, the reason we were losing is because of this man, and we're getting rid of him, and everybody's absolved from the blame.
Right.
And I think you can have some order, and you can at least evaluate some of the players if you stay with the guy who's still the head coach, assuming that you really understand what quitting is and what quitting isn't. And I don't think either team has quit.
That's a pretty good point. Maybe they just suck. And
they're bad. I mean, that's who Philadelphia is. Look, I can make a stronger case that Philadelphia could be 0-11 than I can to make a case that Philadelphia is really a 6-6 team.
Yeah.
And I think we confuse quitting with talent. I don't think they're talented. I don't think the San Diego Chargers are. You don't give up a 4th and 29 when you've got a lot of talent.
See, I felt like you're
poorly
you can coached
blame
team
Norv.
if you give
Everybody
up.
can blame Norv for that. 4th and 29, blowing a 24-0 lead at half, or 4th and 29. There's more than just bad coaching going on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The only thing I'd say about the 4th and 29 is you had the guy jogging behind Ray Rice before he made the cut, and if he's running full speed, he just catches him from behind when Ray Rice changes direction and goes left. And to me, that's symptomatic of the kind of team you have, because that doesn't happen in the Niners. The Niners are chasing Ray Rice down, and the Chargers are kind of jogging after him. And to me, that's the difference in the two teams. So what was the thing that jumped out at you the most yesterday? I mean, for me, it was Kaepernick.
The Greg McElroy era?
Well, that too, but Kaepernick, you knew there were going to be some growing pains with him. He definitely, the inexperience he had really hurt the Niners in that game, not just with the lateral, but going out of bounds when he shouldn't have. And did he need to have a growing pains type game? Do you still believe in him?
Oh, I think the reason he's in there is for the growing pains, because this isn't about just winning and beating the St. Louis Rams. This isn't about just playing the Miami Dolphins this week. This is about getting game experience so that when we have to play a game in New York or in San Francisco against the Giants or against the Packers or against these really good teams, or in the Super Bowl against the Broncos or the Houston Texans or whichever team, is we're ready to play it, and he's got more experience. I think this is a bigger issue than just a game-to-game. That's what Jim Harbaugh's saying, but reality is this is about a global issue. This is about how can we beat the best teams, and how can we give him enough experience so he's able to beat the best teams.
And you agreed with that decision?
Well, I do. I think that Jim knows that his team better than anybody. He knows what his team needs. And Kaepernick, who I didn't believe had enough accuracy to be a good quarterback, has proven me wrong in that sense, that he's proven that he can run with the football, which I've always thought he was more run than he was pass, but he's played very well in the system. Both quarterbacks have played far better than I ever thought they could in the system. So I do think because his unique size, because of his speed, his athleticism, and that arm, if it's a bad weather game and they have to go to New York or something like that, he can do it.
How many coaches would have had the balls to make that decision?
Well, not many, but Jim's pretty secure in his own skin, and the fact he played quarterback also helps him.
Right. I loved it. I wrote about it on Friday.
Room.
Oh, God, sorry.
he can stand in his room. He can stand in the team meeting room and say, "Look, fellas, I played in this league. I know what it's like. I understand what you're going through. So we all have to be tough. Dr. Phil doesn't need to come in here."
I loved it. I wrote about it on Friday a little bit, but you always want to make the decision that the teams that ultimately you're trying to beat would be afraid of. And I think if I'm the Giants, if I'm the Packers, if I'm the Falcons, you make that QB switch, and I'm going, uh-oh. Because now that ceiling of the team has kind of gone up a couple floors. Because, the bottom line is with Alex Smith, it was really tough for them to throw downfield and make big plays. And anytime they were down 10, you felt like they were done. They're out of the game. Now you don't feel that way with Kaepernick. And I don't know if he'll be ready this year. It's a big risk, and it might backfire and blow up in his face. You might have a game, it might be in New York or it might be wherever, where he just turns the ball over 3 times, throws the ball on the ground a lot, and just everybody goes, "Oh my God, they blew the Super Bowl by doing that." But I think they had to take the risk because I just didn't think they were potent enough offensively to win with what they had. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I do. I think they needed to be a bigger issue. I think they needed to be more explosive, and I think Kaepernick gives them that. Now, I would have having not watched their practices and see Kaepernick with his accuracy, based on his college play and his preseason play and his play when he came in games this year. You just never thought his accuracy was going to be that good, but it has, and he's made some incredibly talented throws that very few people have the ability to make, and so he has gotten better, and he's going to get better the more he plays.
Houston just won. This week wasn't that impressive, but those 3 games they won, I thought were really, really impressive. They win in Chicago in the pouring rain, just terrible weather conditions on the road Sunday night. They win in Jacksonville the next week. This game, you're going to have those 1 or 2 stink bomb games. They somehow fought it off. They won in overtime, came back from a big thing. 4 days later, they win in the Lions. They're dead in the Lions. They have to go in overtime again. I just thought they showed so much toughness in those 3 games that's now a team that, as a Patriots fan, I'm really hoping doesn't get the number 1 seed. I'm now afraid of that team. Do you feel like they have pole position now, not just in the AFC, but in the whole league?
I think they do, and part of it is because I don't think they'll be able to lose that pole position in the league in terms of the home field. I wrote this last week that I believe that because of their mental toughness to win those games, playing Jacksonville in overtime, coming back from a 10-point lead, and winning the Jacksonville game, say what you want about Jacksonville's team, it still required blood, sweat, and tears to win the game. They won that game. Then on a short week, they go and play another overtime game, and they fight themselves back. Now, if the Lions make the field goal, with that, I don't think it would have affected my perspective of them because they fought their way back into that game. And then in Chicago with weather, which is always going to be something you think about when a team that plays relatively weather-free down in Houston, can they do that? So I think those 3 wins are impactful, just like I thought the New England win yesterday was impactful in terms of their fourth quarter drive. There's certain periods of the season where teams do something where you say, that's going to really help them when it comes to playoff time. Pittsburgh's win in Baltimore. Charlie Batch really proven me wrong. I thought the kid that plays with that teases Cam Newton in the commercial threw it better than Charlie Batch, and Charlie Batch did it yesterday and won the game. That was a kind of win that you look back on the season and you say that's why they were going to be successful. I think that's what I'm saying with Houston in that time frame.
Yeah, I like your point about you're almost not pointing at games during a season as much as little check marks. And I agree with you. That Patriots drive was a big drive because that was a losable game. Miami actually played really well. They have a good front 7. And the Pats have Houston and San Francisco coming, so you knew they weren't going to empty the playbook in this game. It kind of game you just want to grind out, take care of business, but not show too much for the next 2. And I think, you look at that Houston, they just gutting out that Thanksgiving game. I thought that might have been the most impressive win of the season. I know they got some help. But, that, and then Pittsburgh, look at this from the reverse. That was a terrible loss by Baltimore. How do you lose that game at home to Charlie Batch?
Well, yeah, and, look, San Diego had them beat in San Diego. Baltimore has found a way to win those games, and it's a tribute to Baltimore. It's not a slap at anybody. they found a way to win these close games and prove the mental toughness, and typically they would. And look, they defended they knew they were going to get trick plays. They knew they were going to get all the things that Pittsburgh did to them. But what they didn't realize is Pittsburgh took their game up a level. That the embarrassing 8 turnovers in Cleveland probably had more to do with that game than anything. And Pittsburgh's focus and concentration and demeanor was really was the difference in the game.
And it also seemed like that whole locker room feels a great deal of affection for Charlie Batch, and he took such a beating after the 3 picks and the 8 turnovers in general. And oh my God, this guy's washed up. And it really seems like they rallied around that a little bit. Which, if they make the playoffs and Roethlisberger comes back, that's a really dangerous 5 or 6 seed. I was hoping that they were done.
That loss would have put them in a position, especially that loss combined with Indianapolis stealing a playoff-type win up in Detroit to get it to 8.
Yeah.
To me, that when Indy posted the 8th win, it almost made the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game a huge win for Pitt. Had to be just to secure a positioning for the wild card.
Yeah, because I don't know why, but the Bengals just seem every week they seem to play a crappy team or a team that's in total turmoil or whatever, or at least for the last 2 weeks have been that way.
This all started when they beat the Giants at home.
That was
when
a
I didn't
good
think
win.
they could do it.
So they have, they're at Dallas. I'm sorry, they're home for Dallas next week.
Right.
Then they go Thursday night at Philly. And that's normally a game where you'd go, oh, God, they got screwed with that game. But actually, it's probably the number 1 team you'd want to pick to play on a Thursday night, right? What's going to be a more depressing crowd than that? And then
assuming anybody shows up to it.
Yeah. And then they had 10 days rest before the at Pittsburgh game. And then they finished the year home for Baltimore. And at that point, Baltimore, I'm guessing, will have clinched the division and probably will not be playing for anything. Because odds are that either the Pats or Denver is going to lock down that 2 seed. I mean, my guess would probably be, wouldn't you say Denver has, because the Pats still have Houston and San Francisco left. I don't know if Denver's going to lose again this season. What are you seeing with Denver?
Well, Denver has the Baltimore game, which will be a playoff game. That'll be a huge one.
I'm sorry, you're right, at Baltimore. Yep.
So that's one that they could, but I agree. It's going to be very difficult for, New England to hold on to that 2 seed when you have to play. But they have them both at home. They have San Francisco and they have Houston and San Francisco back to back, Monday night and then Sunday night. So this is really going to be the stretch from Seattle to Miami was the easiest stretch of the season for the Patriots. Now they're into the home stretch, and it's going to be the most difficult.
Who do you like more at this point right now, Denver and New England?
Boy, that's tough. New England's defense has played better, and so has Denver's, and the way Denver's offense is playing right now, I think that's a toss-up for me. I think Denver's playing so good. And the mental toughness, you can see it with each game, the evolution of Peyton Manning's personality taking over on Denver's team is really fascinating. And that would be a different. And I don't think it really matters where the game's played. I really don't. I think Peyton Manning can go somewhere and win. I think Brady can go somewhere and win. I don't think it really matters. But what does matter is the injuries. And right now, I think I would favor Denver because with New England's situation in terms of their injuries, Gronk, when is he coming back? How hurt is Edelman? How are they? Chandler Jones hasn't played. I mean, they've got a lot of guys. Logan Mankins has been out. Their offensive line's beat up. I think right now I'd favor Denver.
Yeah, they played in Week 5. The Pats won by 10, but it wasn't even that close. It really did seem like they were just a better team. And over these last 2 months, Denver has just closed that gap. And now, as you said, it does seem like the team has taken on Manning's personnel, and also the Von Miller factor. The Patriots don't have anybody like Von Miller. So, statistically, New England's offense has actually been a little bit better than Denver's these last few weeks, but I like the way Denver's playing, and I agree with you. I think the 2 teams other than Houston that could win anywhere are Denver and New England. I don't think Baltimore on the road. That's a team I would want to see, right?
Yeah, Baltimore's a funny team, especially offensively. I mean, when Baltimore plays New England, they have a different mindset offensively. when they play Denver, they'll have a different mindset, because I really believe Baltimore goes into the game instead of not thinking about we're going to be explosive on offense. I think they go into the game thinking, well, we're playing Pittsburgh, so this is how we have to play this game. And I think sometimes if they would just be explosive all the time, they may be better. And when they play New England, they know they need to score points, so they take more chances. When they play Denver, they'll take more chances. They know they need to score points, and I think sometimes it hurts them, and that's why their offense struggles. The San Diego game, they don't really get serious on offense until the fourth quarter. Where was that offense before?
Yeah, out of all the teams, it seems like they spend the most time trying to keep Ray Rice healthy and fresh. Right? How many times did he even run the ball yesterday? 12?
Yeah. One of them was the play of the game.
He's at 198 carries right now. He's got 49 receptions. So it's not like they're underusing him, but it does seem like you can catch them on these games where they're like, yeah, let's try to win this one without Ray. I'm fascinated by the AFC playoff picture because, again, Pittsburgh is the team nobody wants to play, and there's a chance Indianapolis could be the 5 seed and Pittsburgh could be the 6 seed. So then you have the situation where you're actually better off
being 4.
You're better off being 4 than 3, and now you have Denver and Baltimore and New England, who basically are all going to be around the same, and they might actually be jockeying in Week 17 to get into that 4 spot. Which
I've said this last week, and before they were able, I didn't think they would beat Baltimore, but the way Pittsburgh has played defensively the last month of the season, I don't think anybody really. I mean, they've done everything going into the last night's game to win the game with their defense. I mean, they did what they did in Cleveland. They could have won the game with their defense. What they did in the first Baltimore game, they could have won with their defense. I mean, they gave up 13 points, but really only 3 with their defense. They had a punt return for a touchdown and a turnover for a field goal. So they've done everything defensively. Their defense is playing as well as they can play. So to me, they're a dangerous, dangerous team. And now if Roethlisberger comes back and he's healthy, they're even more dangerous.
I would think, I mean, it's usually important every year, but this year it's really super important to get that 2 seed. You do not want to get you want 3-6 against Pittsburgh.
Right. It's either you want to be 2 or 4, it seems like. I don't think you want to be 3, predicated on where Pittsburgh ends up. Now, I don't think Pittsburgh can catch Baltimore for a 3 or a 4 seed if that's where it goes. But and you need to be able to figure out where they're going to be. And I don't see how Pittsburgh doesn't get to 11 wins. Look at their schedule. They have San Diego coming back into town this week. They've got a chance to win these games.
Yeah. And then the NFC, I don't think anybody cares where they play on any given week. I just don't think there's an NFC team that you'd look at and go, yeah, we don't want to, we can't beat that team. Even San Francisco, because at least you could talk yourself into the young quarterback thing. But do you think anybody's really afraid of Atlanta?
No, but I mean, Atlanta's a little bit like Houston. They keep proving everything you want to count them out. The situation goes against them. I mean, they've won in some tough places. They've won some tough games. They've won when Matt Ryan hasn't played well. I mean, at some point you have to just say, look, this is who they are. They're mentally tough. They can play well, and and just because they haven't beaten the Giants or beaten the Packers or beaten the 49ers, that doesn't mean anything. They've had a couple of these benchmark games that helps their confidence.
Yeah. I rooted for those 03 and 04 Patriots that everybody tried to pick apart for 2 years because they kept grinding out those close games. Atlanta does seem like they just get gifts. Like some of those, what happened to Breeze on last Thursday? It was really one of the worst games he's ever played. I don't know how the Saints lost that game. I watched that whole game. I don't understand how they lost.
Especially when they come back down. I mean, how many times in your lifetime have you seen Drew Brees at the end of the half let the clock run out when he's got the ball in the red zone? I mean, that's not going to happen. But
Atlanta, I was going to say Atlanta and Baltimore have seemed like they have benefited from just more dumb play by the other team than anyone I can remember. I mean, it's really amazing.
And they've been good enough, and don't lose. They've been good enough to take advantage of it. Some teams don't benefit from the other team being bad.
Yeah.
And they don't take advantage of it.
The one thing you can say with Atlanta, and the one reason why I do think they're obviously they're dangerous. They're 11-1, but they can get those big long plays when they need them. And I think that's something that, especially in this day and age where it's just so easy to get a 70-yard play, that's another reason why nobody wants to play Washington in a playoff game. These teams that can just get these 70-yard touchdowns on the drop of a hat are a whole other animal. What NFC team do you like the most right now?
Well, I still think that, and tonight we'll find out more about the Giants, but to me, the 49ers and the Giants have the most complete teams, and maybe the Giants can match up better to the 49ers, but when I watch the 49ers on tape, I rarely see a team as dominant in terms of the physicality of how they play as the 49ers.
Yeah.
And they'll travel well. They went to Green Bay early, beginning of the season and won. This 49er team, to me, to me, it's a tribute to Jeff Fisher and his staff in St. Louis to be able to play 10 quarters with them as evenly as they did, especially considering, they went over to London and the Patriots blew them out and teams have moved the ball on them, and they play the 49ers really tough. And I think the 49ers, in terms of talent and toughness and all of the elements in three phases, I think the best team in the NFC.
Well, we have another subplot right now with that division, which is amazingly the Seahawks can win that division pretty easily if a couple things happen. They need the Niners to lose to the Patriots, which I think is conceivable. The Patriots are going to be favored in that game. Then they have the Niners, Week 16, in Seattle, where they have not lost this year. And their other three games are home for Arizona, at Buffalo in Week 15, Niners in Week 16, and then they're home for St. Louis in Week 17. Not only do they have a chance to win the division, they have an outside chance for a 2 seed. Some stuff
which
would
is
have to
remarkable
go right,
for a team that just won its second road game yesterday.
I gave up on them. I thought it was over. I'm back. By the way, I bought my bandwagon seat back on eBay. Because here's the thing. I picked them because of Russell Wilson, because I thought he was going to be special, and he was special yesterday. So I feel vindicated in a weird way. But, man, it is those Pete Carroll teams, they are harrowing. They always hang around in every game, and then you just kind of don't know what's going to happen. But are you a believer now in the Seahawks?
Oh, I've always been a believer when they play at home. I just haven't been a believer on the road. And now, are you going to tell me, I think part of when you review that schedule, is the corner Browner going to stay healthy? Is stay off the suspended list? Are they going to be able to keep both those guys on their team? Richard Sherman, can they keep them both there? Are they going to get suspended? If they lose both their starting corners, that's going to impact them whether they play home or away at that point.
Right. Well, they luck out this week. They got Arizona at home.
Which is, there's nothing as bad as what Arizona is on offense right now.
Nothing. It actually might be bordering on historic. I don't know if I've ever seen a worse offense.
Yeah, somebody sent me a tweet yesterday about Ryan Lindley might be the only quarterback in the history of the NFL with 70 passes that has, I forget the exact quote, but they're doing things that most people can't most teams have never done in the NFL with Arizona's offense. But the good thing is, though, Bill, here's the good thing, is they drafted Michael Floyd to open up some things for Larry Fitzgerald.
The John Skelton 2 TDs and 5 picks. Ryan Lindley 0 TDs and 5 picks. The 40.4 QB rating. 103 pass attempts. 448 yards. 4.4 yards per pass attempt.
Yeah, they're so bad. We don't even talk about Kevin Cobb and what they gave up to get him.
And then on top of it, they're running 3.6 yards a carry. It really might be one of the worst offenses ever put together.
Well, their offensive line is, they can't, like I said, I've said this many times, unless they can get the defense to count to 5 Mississippi, they got no chance to throw the ball. They have to throw it quickly, and this is just not a, look, it is what it is. Poor Ken Wisenhunt. He's not a bad offensive coach. This is, when you're evaluating a team, it's players, coaches, or scheme, and this is a lot of players right here. They don't have the manpower to hang in there.
Does he get blamed for that?
Don't ever confuse the Jets with the 85 Bears now. That defensive performance yesterday was spectacular by the Jets, but it wasn't against an offense of any significance.
Does Wisenhunt get blamed for that? Is he the fall guy at the end of the season?
Well, he could be. It's you have to get to the origins of the Kevin Cobb trade, because this is where it all started. Because if Kevin Cobb could do something, and what they paid for him, and what they thought he could be, if he could have been that, then it could have alleviated some of these problems. Because we see everywhere, when a good quarterback comes on the field, it can help move the team. It's not always about the receivers helping the quarterback; it's about the quarterback helping everybody else. I mean, look what Chad Henne did. Look what Chad Henne did. Not that Chad Henne's great, but look what he did when he went in to play against Houston for Blaine Gabbert.
Yeah.
I mean, Justin Blackmon was toiling in obscurity, and all of a sudden he came out of it.
Yeah. Are you allowed to talk about Sanchez since you're going to be the next Jets GM, or can we dive into that at all, or do you want to just...
Certainly, we could talk about Sanchez because he's got $8.5 million of guaranteed money. He's going to be the Jets quarterback. Rex didn't announce today, although he did announce something very important. They practiced great last week, you know that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is he announced that he has 3 really good quarterbacks on his roster.
Yeah, it was good to know that. I had no idea there were 3.
It gets better and better every day. Of course, we covered it live on NFL Network. We were the only, 5-17, we went live to see who's going to play quarterback. But the reality here is Sanchez is going to be the quarterback. I mean, they have to go back to Sanchez. He's on the team for $8.5 million next year. The GM's guaranteed his contract along with a bunch of other guys.
Well, amazingly, they're not out of the playoffs.
But I don't know how they get to 10. They can only get to 9. They're 5-7. They can only get to 9 wins.
But here's the irony: they really can get to 9 wins. They're at
they
Jacksonville,
can get to 9.
at
No,
Tennessee,
they can get to
home
9.
for San Diego, at Buffalo.
But we say that, and we say that on a Monday. But remember, it was all they could do to beat that bad Arizona team yesterday.
Yeah, it's just funny that the Jets fans. I think all of the Jets fans would agree they just want this season to end, but you can't. If your team has a chance to make it to the playoffs, you can't root against that. So they're just like in limbo, It's like the Jet season's on the respirator. They're just going to the hospital every day visiting it. It's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, and if Indy and Indy wins, Indy should win 2 more of these games. I mean, let's face it, Pittsburgh and Baltimore are going to get one of the wild cards, barring some monumental collapse, which I don't see happening. Which leaves the last wild card. Is it Cincinnati? Is it Indy? And then it's a bunch of those other teams. And I can't imagine that those teams are going to fall completely, because the Jets are right now they're 3 games behind Indy with 4 to play, and I think
they're 2 behind Cincy.
And they're 2 behind Cincy with 4 to play. So that's a hard thing to do.
How many coaches do you think at the end of the season will be given their walking papers? Like, let's go through them. Andy Reid, yes.
Yeah, I think the 2 let's go by ultimatums, and I think that's the ultimatum by the San Diego Chargers. Dean Spano said that we have to make the playoffs. I'm bringing Norv Turner. I'm bringing A.J. Smith back. If we don't make the playoffs, then I'm going to make some changes. So you have to assume that since they're 4-8, they're going to make some changes there. And then of course Andy Reid, based on what Jeff Lurie said, not based on anybody saying he's fired, but based on what Jeff Lurie said. So I would say those 2. Those 2 are the owner mandated. I think Carolina's loss in Kansas City yesterday was a backbreaker for them, because they, with Marty Herney, the GM, being gone, you just get the sense that there's going to be a clean sweep there. Now, not that I'm not trying to get Ron Rivera fired or anybody like that, but I just get the sense that that's going to be a job that could open up there. People say, well, what about Buffalo? I don't see Buffalo. I think the Raiders are a team that could be one and done the way they played.
I was going to ask you about that. They've had, I think, 5 terrible games in a row, and just look like
they're beyond terrible. I mean,
yeah.
It's as an ex-Raider. I mean, even the Raider Nation would have to. Yesterday they just don't cover people.
Right. And meanwhile, Pat Shurmur, much maligned Pat Shurmur. I know I've gotten some comedy out of him in my column. They've actually been quietly playing well for about 2 months, and I think they're 4-8, but they easily could be 6-6. I think
they play everybody close. I mean, they don't score a lot of points. They keep it close. And I mean, yesterday's game, it's 13-10, and they have one of those moments. And give the Browns credit, they have one of those moments where they come up with it. I mean, the Raiders are getting ready to score, and Carson underthrows a pass, and Sheldon Brown intercepts it, and which is okay, fine, great play by Sheldon Brown. But then the Browns respond by taking it, I think, 95 yards down and putting the game away and score.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of those where you say, boy, they did a great job. Now, they could have, You can play around with their, but the Browns are always going to be in games because they play sound defense. They play hard. I mean, they've played hard all season long. They haven't stopped playing, and so I think that's a tribute to the coaching staff.
Jason Garrett, these are probably 4-game testing ground for him.
That one, everyone tells me in the league, he's coming back, and I would be surprised if he didn't. Although when I watch them, I'm not in love with anything about the Cowboys.
Wisenhunt, maybe. Jim Schwartz, 4-8.
He just got a contract extension. I mean, it's hard to believe that Detroit's a pretty loyal organization. I think Detroit's problems are, look, let's just put this in a capsule. Detroit is supposed to be great in the defensive line. They've put their money there. Andrew Luck in the final with no timeouts, they can't get any pressure on Andrew Luck, and he wins the game. That's all you need to know.
Right. I got to be honest. I can't even remember who the Jacksonville coach is.
It's Mike Mularkey.
Oh, yeah, Mike Mularkey.
Now, he's tied to, Gene Smith, the general manager down there, and he just got an extension, and they just started together. So, so what we're talking about is, these one-year coaches. Is Dennis Allen one and done in Oakland? I doubt it. Is Mike Mularkey one and done in Jacksonville? It looks like, there could be. I always think everybody thinks there's 8, 9, or 10. I always think it ends up being 4 or 5 at the most.
Yeah. And do we think the Oregon coach is actually somebody's going to throw some serious cash at him?
Well, I don't think money's when you got Phil Knight backing you up, you're not going to be. It's not about money. It's about preference of life. It's like Jim Harbaugh. Do you want to be? You could have gone to Michigan to be the Michigan head coach from Stanford, but what do you want to be? Do you want to be a head coach in the NFL, or do you want to stay in college? And I think Chip Kelly has to answer that question. It's not about, I'm going to offer you more money. Do you want to still be a head coach in college, or do you want to be a pro? And then the money takes care of itself. My sense of it is, I think Chip Kelly wants to prove to the naysayers that he can handle it, and I think he probably will. There's always going to be a learning curve. He's a smart guy. He went out to Oregon. A lot of people didn't know who he was from New Hampshire. Who's this guy going out to Oregon? And he changed the way we view football. And so anybody that can shift and change the way we view football or how we play football, to me, deserves to be respected and deserves to be looked into.
That's the guy, when you and I take over the Jets, that's the guy I want us to go after. When I'm your unofficial conciliary, I want the Tom Hagen. I want to be the Tom Hagen role.
Yeah.
Just come in.
Well, if you're in that role for the Jets, you're going to need to have a lot of counseling because there's a lot of contracts that are locked in. I mean, I don't think, there's a lot of players on the Jet team that are coming back, and there's not a lot of cap room to wiggle around either.
Would you have played Oh, go ahead.
It's not an easy job, that one.
Would you have played the Chiefs game yesterday or postponed it a day?
Boy, that's a hard one for me. I don't know. I think Romeo did the best thing in terms of ask the players. They're the ones who have to play in the game. I mean, my heart's going to be heavy regardless of what happens, and I would find it hard to have concentrated and play, but the players know best, and I think Rack had a great line. I thought, Brady Quinn was great after the press conference, but I think, football players, they wanted to go back to something that was 3 hours to keep them away from the memory of that awful event that happened at their facility and happened at Belcher's home. So I think they did the right thing to seek outside counsel on that because I don't know if my emotions or my knowledge would have been able to handle the answer to that.
It seems like moving it to Monday night would have. I thought that's what they should have done. But if all the players vote unanimously to play, then I don't know. I mean, it's just hard for me to believe that Romeo Crennel could have coached that game and not been 100% affected. I just don't know how 24 hours later you're on the sideline.
He's going to be affected for the rest of his life because I don't know if Scott or Pioli or Romeo are going to be able to ever. It's one thing to go to a movie and see that, and that affects you for the time, but to see it in person in real life with real, I don't know if that ever gets away. And they did a great job of making sure we understood that poor little girl is not going to know her father or her mother, and for no reason at all. I mean, it's just really sad.
I was writing in my column on Friday about Robert Griffin versus Sam Bradford, and this is something you and I talked about in April, and I just feel like you always go for the star, and I feel like this is the same way in basketball too. Like you always want the dollar over the quarters. You just, in my opinion, it's just the proven track record of that is what it is. You're usually going to be right. Everybody was saying that Bradford was too hard to trade. It would have hurt their cap. But then when you flip it around, like Griffin's rookie contract, because this new rookie scale, it's so cheap. Even if you had Bradford's cap hold, if it was like $12 million or $14 million, whatever, for that 1 year, Griffin's making so little money that it kind of all evens out. I also think they could have gotten at least a first-round pick from whoever, maybe Cleveland, I don't know, for Bradford. Should this be a bigger deal?
Well, I think it can only be judged until a time takes over. It's like when Ernie Accorsi, the GM of the Giants, made the Eli trade. Could he have just stayed where he was and picked Phillip Rivers? You really don't know until time plays out. And until Sam Bradford gets a chance to prove that he can win and the team's better around him and he can handle it, we really don't know. And it's not about style points, it's about substance and winning. So I think you have to wait a little bit before you make that, before you declare the winner of that and what you would have done. But ideally, you would want to get stars, but I think Sam Bradford, in my belief, is he has star quality in him.
Really?
I think he does. I think it comes to, look, let me say this to you. First of all, RG3, I mean, we have, and I love RG3, and I do, but let's put things in perspective a little bit here in terms of, he went to a pretty good team. Now, I know they have some injuries, and I know they have some problems in terms of their defense and all that. But, he went to the better team, and Andrew Luck went to the worst team, and Andrew Luck's posted 8 wins. And RG3 has got, 5 wins so far this season. And, and so does Sam Bradford. So, I think it translates into win, not style points. And until one of those guys win a championship or take their team to consistent playoffs, I don't think we're really going to know. And RG3 playing behind that line in St. Louis, the one that Sam Bradford's playing behind, some might say he's playing behind a bad line, me included, in Washington. You might think that's tough too, but he does have unique plays, but I still think we can't lose sight of what Sam Bradford can do and was capable of doing.
Well, allow me to say that what was the game they lost that Atlanta game. They win that game if Griffin doesn't get hurt. So he has 5 wins, but really I feel like that would have been the 6th. You're not with me on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, we can always go through that.
I don't know. I just think the guy is one of the most exciting, and he did it in college too.
He
and
is.
His force of personality of him, and the charisma, and just the way people talk about him. I don't think you
well,
pass
he's
that
remarkable,
up.
and I mean, he's the team captain, and give Kyle Shanahan some credit for what he's doing with them too. Because I think the system has married the player, which is what you want. Now, could that system have been there in St. Louis? I don't know. Yeah,
but Mike, you make it seem like he's playing with, the Colts in the early 2000s. Like, his receivers were decimated. He had nobody. He's making plays with, like, third-string receivers, 6th-round running back.
Have you checked the receivers out at the St. Louis Rams?
I just haven't. I watched Sam Bradford. I just think is he ever going to be an All-Pro?
I think he has the talent to be one. I think you have to, and I'm not saying he's there yet, but I think the kind of team that you want to be to continually compete and have the foundation for success, I think Sam Bradford would be the right guy. And not only do you still have Sam Bradford, you have a boatload of draft picks to maximize the full effect of your football team.
Yeah, we already saw what happened with that, though. They traded down from 6 to 28?
Yeah.
I mean, they went backwards with that pick, so they screwed that up. They got nothing out of last year's draft. And now they have 2 extra first-rounders.
Well, they did. No, they got something. I mean, they got that running back. I mean, he's playing well for them. They got stuff out of the draft. I mean,
no, but I'm saying they didn't get like a marquee guy. You had the number 2 pick in the draft, and you went backwards, and you ended up kind of throwing darts against the dartboard a little bit. And
well, yeah. I mean, I just think it's too early to judge.
Can I also say this? If I have a choice between getting a whole draft pick package from the Washington Redskins or getting a whole draft pick package from the Cleveland Browns, I'm going to pick the Cleveland Browns and go with the track record of futility and misery and the fact that something always goes wrong with that team. Like, isn't that the team you want the number 1 picks from?
Well, up until a couple of weeks ago, it looked like it was going to be a high pick in Washington.
Well, we're going to have to...
Washington has to prove to me they can play some defense. I mean, and they have a lot of injuries on defense, and they still have a ways to go in terms of being able to prove that they're a bona fide playoff team. I mean, they're 5-6. If they win tonight, they're 6-6. They're tied with the Giants for second place. Do they get in the playoffs? Boy, I think that'll be a challenge. Your Seattle Seahawks will eke them out.
Do you think they win tonight, the Redskins?
I think it's going to be hard for them. I think that the one thing when a guy like RG3, who's the Redskins have played the Giants really well, and I think Mike Shanahan knows how to attack them offensively. Kyle Shanahan knows how to attack them offensively, and defensively they've always done a pretty good job. But this Giant team seems a little healthier right now. I think a very good athletic defensive line will help slow down. I don't think you're going to stop RG3 what he does because he's unique with his feet, his movement, and his arm combined. It's not always just run. It's about run, locate, and throw. I think that you have to have a good defensive line. Jason Pierre-Paul doesn't play tonight, then I think the Redskins can easily win.
Last football question.
Not easily win. I think they could win.
Last football question. I wrote on Friday about just how much the concussion culture and just the hard-hitting thing and how much it's changing what we're watching this season and some of the penalties that have been called and just how you're just more aware of guys getting. Even Sidney Rice yesterday catches the game-winning touchdown, and everybody's just – one guy tried to pick him up. Everybody pushes him away. No, let him lie there. Let's make sure he's okay. How much has it affected just following and watching the sport for you, just how much things have changed this year?
And I started in the league in '84 with the 49ers. So when the Niners played the Bears and ESPN ran that montage of Ronnie Lott, who was one of my favorite players of all time, and Dick Butkus, I sat there and said, these guys could play today. They would have never been able to play. They would have allowed them to play. So the game has changed so dramatically about how you can impact the middle of the field. Both players impacted the middle of the field with their physicality, their toughness. Nobody wanted to go inside. Now, you can throw the ball more inside, and it's trying to make it a safer game. And then I watched, like you watched the Raider Cleveland game yesterday, and you see Brandon Weeden, who played probably his best game of his career. He got hit so many times that if it would have been probably anybody other than Brandon Weeden, there would have been about 3 penalties on the field. Yeah. And so it's just hard to judge all the time what gets called and what doesn't. It's really hard for me.
Charlie Batch, they called that key penalty, the roughing the passer in the fourth quarter. There's another one like 10 minutes before that they could have called too.
The one that Nada did a couple minutes before, which I didn't know how that wasn't a flag. I'm educated to think that's a flag now, and it wasn't. Now, did he lead with his hands? But his head was still there.
The other interesting thing I've noticed, like with the running quarterbacks, when they're scampering, because they know team defenses now are so terrified to hit them, that they're actually taking advantage of it a little more now. Russell Wilson is somebody that's really smart when he's in the middle of the field. He knows, like, I can get a couple extra yards because these guys think I'm going to slide. I'm not. So It's almost like that. Now that's swung toward the offense too, and it feels like all of these things are swinging toward the offense. And if I was a defensive player, I'd just be at wit's end. What do I do? How do I play football?
It's really hard, and you can see the really well-coached teams that almost tag off on the quarterback. They don't really hit them. I mean, there was a penalty on I forget what game it was, but sometimes you get a call and you say, I don't know what the guy, like when I'm watching it, I'm wondering what he would have needed to do to not have a penalty. That's when I have problems.
Last question. Can you quickly go through your feelings as a Sixer fan? You're 10-7, kind of a surprise team considering all the terrible things that have happened. Yet you have this Andrew Bynum thing looming. He might be out for the year with this knee issue. He grew a very snazzy hairdo to try to distract people from the fact that he might be out for the year. Would you give him the money this summer?
Oh no, to me, I'm not going to give him the money until I know for certain where it is medically. I mean, I think I'm not going to call that bluff. There's no way. Now there's precedent of this. I mean, look, the Miami Dolphins failed Drew Brees. But when you're talking about knees and basketball players, and especially in a town where you traded for Jeff Rulon, who had bad knees, I mean, you have to think about the future. I think it was a trade they had to make.
Me too.
Look, Jason Richardson has been a really good player for them, and I know they gave up a lot of assets just to get him, but the reality of it, they had to take it. They get the cap room. They still have the ability to be flexible. They still have some pieces. I think they have to make a trade now to get some kind of low and unless they're going to join the under six league again this year, because they can't rebound. So I think you just move forward and see where he goes in his rehab. I would make no commitments to him whatsoever, and do a lot of what ifs and play it against each other and make sure that you're doing the best thing and not fall in love. I think partly being a general manager is you can't fall in love with the idea you had, you can't fall in love with the player, and you have to always be open-minded. That's why you should never see owners, you should never see GMs sitting next to owners at games. You should never see GMs in a locker room at a game. You should never see GMs when they call the huddle up at the football field, the GM's there. I think there has to be a distinction between making an emotional decision and making a decision what's best, and that's what I hope they're doing in Philadelphia. I hope they're taking the emotion out of it, and they're not trying to make a decision based on the last decision. We got to do this to make it right. We're going to start Mark Sanchez this week because that's what we have to do because we guaranteed his contract. I think when you can do that, you'll make the best decision.
You know what the VP of Common Sense would say?
Yeah.
Let him go. Don't spend the money on him because you're playing percentages and probabilities at this point. And just look at the history of the league with centers who are injury prone. Once they start missing, Bynum is somebody that missed a lot of games with the Lakers until last year when he finally stayed healthy. But when you're talking about a guy missing a whole season in the middle of his career as a big guy, and the wear and tear of a season on big guys is so much different than perimeter guys. And I just think it's a bad bet because if you're wrong, you're done. Everybody gets fired if you're wrong.
But it shouldn't be, my point to you is it shouldn't be a linear bet. It should be a global, it should be, if we sign him, here's what we do. If we don't sign him, there's got to be many different options. And there's a difference between being divergent in thinking and being creative in thinking. And I think clearly in this case, the 76ers need to be divergent in thinking. How do they solve this problem in many different ways? And I think once you can get to that point, now you have an opportunity to make the right decision. Unemotion involved, because if the end is where you are right now is not to re-sign him. If that's the best decision, then let wisdom come to you. Don't chase wisdom and make a decision.
I would actually. This is a little renegade. I would trade him right now. I would trade him before the February trade deadline because make somebody like a team like Houston. And Daryl's dying to get another star. Maybe that's a team that's willing to take a risk like that. Like you get Bynum, he's with your training staff, he gets a feel for your team, you try to talk him into like that's a pretty interesting gamble. I don't know if Philly's the right team to make that gamble. And I'm not sure if anyone's the right team to make that gamble, but maybe get some expiring contracts for him, and I don't know. But I know they won't do that because, they built this whole team around Bynum. But I do think that trading Bynum scenario is pretty
people say that, and they haven't really, because all these moves were pre-Bynum. All these moves to get the better shooters, Nick Young, thanks for that.
I try to tell you not to do any
I
of those
know.
things.
I mean, we're all predicated on Bynum not being here. The Bynum thing didn't come.
They were built around the franchise player is going to be Iguodala, and they upgraded that franchise player to Bynum. But I think their goal was to parlay some of their assets into a trade for, somebody bigger. But I think the big mistake they made was amnestying Elton Brand. Even though he's washed up, I would have just kept him because he's an expiring contract. Would not have spent the Kwame Brown, Nick Young
the Kwame
money.
Brown one is the one I don't understand. I never did. And if you're gonna, now you draft Moultrie, you give up a future one, you ought to play him a little bit to see if you can get some. The guy led the Southeast Conference in rebounding. He can't get any rebounds, so he must be bad in practice. I'm not at practice, so I don't know. But to me, I think you're right, though. I think you have to look at the job of a general manager, and it's different than being a fan. Is you have to look at every decision unemotionally. And you have to do constantly what's the right decision for your team based on where you're going and what you have to do. And you cannot allow your past decisions to affect yourself because all you end up doing is covering up your mistakes.
I'm going to keep that in mind when we're running the LA Chargers next year.
Yeah, please do. That would be great. And remind me, play that back because I'll be the one saying it all the time. because I see it. You know, I've learned this from experience. You try to. The first rule of scouting is never to begin with the end in mind, and so you always try to be objective. But when you're making these decisions, you have to really be. And I think it's the best GMs in sports try to almost divorce themselves from their team so they make non-emotional decisions.
The best one ever was Belichick with Bledsoe and Brady, because they had just given Bledsoe that giant extension. He's like, hey, what do you want me to do? Brady's better. It gives me a better chance to win. I'm going with Brady. Sorry. And
that set the foundation for the organization.
Yeah.
Because now when they have one of those situations that come up, whether it will be maybe next year with Wes Welker, if they have somebody who's better, they just go with them. I mean, they've set precedent for it. Now, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying there's not a sense of sympathy for what a player has done for your franchise. But you have to move on. The uniforms stay, and the players never are.
All right, we are taking the BS Report to a part 2, talking a little TV with Alan Sepinwall, Mike Lombardi. As always, yeah, you missed the TV part. We just did football.
I'd love to hear. I've not watched Boardwalk or Homeland yet, but I will. So I don't want to. So I'll have to wait until listen to that.
Well, you're a Mad Men expert. We only bring you in for Mad Men. We don't bring you in for the other shows.
Boardwalk has been. I mean, Boardwalk has been pretty good. At Homeland, I'm very disappointed with.
All right, Mike Lombardi, as always, a pleasure. We will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Bill.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.